Good morning again, my friends, my precious, precious friends. Thank you for joining the Carnivore Hippie once again. Fasting. I'm sure you've heard the term. I'm sure you've heard something about it. If you've been on any kind of a journey to modify your diet and improve your health, I am sure you have heard that term, and you've probably seen a lot of information about it. Maybe you know something about it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you're not. But in any case, since you're here, I'm going to assume you're interested in my thoughts. So here we go. My journey towards improved health actually began with fasting. At my heaviest, I weighed just over 300 pounds. And I was desperate enough to do something about it, although I was still eating a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. But I was desperate for something to help because at over 300 pounds, and only 5'6", I was morbidly obese, and I was beginning to have some really significant musculoskeletal issues with my weight. And in trying to do something about those, I considered bariatric surgery. I had health insurance at the time that would have given me access to that. So I started doing some research. And even though I didn't like the idea of surgeons cutting bits of my body out and restructuring it so that it basically wouldn't work the way it was supposed to for the rest of my life, I was also desperate enough to seriously consider it because I felt helpless to do anything on my own. But as I began to study, because I wasn't going to undertake it without understanding exactly what was going to go on, as I studied it, I realized that the benefits of bariatric surgery basically were that people just didn't eat. It was the same thing as just not eating food. They cut bits of your body out to the point where number one, you can't eat much volume of food, and number two, the way your small intestine in some surgeries, the way your small intestine deals with the food is completely changed. That's the most radical form of surgery by my understanding. Anyhow, the more I began to understand that bariatric surgery simply prevents you from eating food, I thought, well, wait a minute. Why can't I just not eat? That didn't seem that unreasonable compared to having a surgeon cut parts of my body off and reroute my innards permanently. And so I thought, well, what the heck? I'll try it. Now, at the time, keep in mind, people were touting the great benefits of bariatric surgery to the point where, like I said, my insurance plan that I had at the time would have covered it. The very same people were also saying, you must not fast because that will destroy your metabolism. And that raised the BS flag for me, basically. So you're touting a surgery that basically mimics extreme calorie restriction, but on the other hand, you're telling people, don't do extreme calorie restriction because that'll wreck your metabolism. So right then and there, I'm like, yeah, there's something going on here, and I really don't care what it is, but it's not okay. So I just decided, I didn't tell anybody because I was ashamed, because I was still sort of worried that the people who were telling me that fasting was dangerous might be right, but I was desperate enough that I just did it anyway. Now, what I did, I wouldn't today call fasting. I would call it time-restricted eating. But what I basically did was I went 24 to 36 hours at a time, a couple of times a week, with just no food. Nothing. And yeah, it was uncomfortable, but at first it was pretty doable. And I was still really, really into counting calories at the time because, like I said, I was still on a high carbohydrate, low fat diet, and I was still consuming seed oils, and I was still consuming small amounts of sugar. I wasn't consuming as much carbohydrate as I had been because since I was counting calories, I learned that carbohydrates are very, very calorie dense and food energy dense. Excuse me. I need to move away from using the term calorie because really deep down I don't like it. I think it's confusing. But since everybody here probably understands what I mean when I say calories, I'm not going to worry too much about it. But carbohydrates in general are very food energy dense and not very nutrient dense. So just as a matter of trying to keep my calories or my food energy intake as low as possible, I was eating mostly lean meat and vegetables, non-starchy vegetables. And I wasn't eating much of those at all. I think I got to the point where in between the fasting and the measuring of my meals, I kind of got down to about 900 calories a day, which I figured is between 600 and 900 calories a day is pretty much how much food a person who has had bariatric surgery is going to imbibe in a day. So I figured, yeah, well, if it works for them, why shouldn't it work for me? And you know what? It did. It did. The first time in my life I lost a significant amount of weight and kept it off was when I was doing this. It was fasting 2 to 3 times a week for between 24 and 36 hours, or restricting my eating to certain windows during the week and not eating in between there. Now, I was drinking coffee with artificial sweetener. So there's that, and there are some who will say, well, if you're taking anything but water, you're not fasting. Well, that's neither here nor there because we're talking about the past and this is dead and gone. But I did lose about 40 pounds that way. And I was ecstatic, but it was not sustainable because I got to about 40 pounds off and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I think the reason that I couldn't do it anymore is because after so many years of basically medically abusing my body, unbeknownst to myself, that's what I was doing. My thyroid function was so fragile that the fasting just knocked me for a loop. And eventually, the first couple, I guess about 4 to 6 months into it, I just became so tired. My depression kicked up a notch, and I became irritable, and my emotional state just became unmanageable, and still having to do everything that I needed to do in a day. That on top of the clinical depression I already had, it just became unmanageable, so I had to stop. But interestingly enough, the 40 pounds didn't creep back on. So I thought, well, maybe I can cycle this. Maybe I can do this for a few months and get a few pounds off and then go back to what I was doing, the fasting or the time restricted eating. And maybe if I cycle it, I can keep this going for longer. Well, it didn't turn out that way, but it turned out I wasn't far off. It wasn't far off, but I was thinking of a 3 or 4 times a year cycle when really it should be a once a year cycle. So I was figuring it out closer and closer. And now today, I have since lost 60 or almost 75 more pounds on top of that by going keto and then subsequently carnivore. And that has served me way better. And I believe it's because it's supportive to my really, what I believe is really, really fragile thyroid function. I don't take any thyroid medication anymore because I feel good and because, frankly, the only thing that the thyroid medication ever did for me was make my doctor happy with my blood work. That was the only change I ever noticed. Taking it or not taking it, I did not feel any different at all. So once I got to the point where I was feeling good, I just decided, I'm not going to do this anymore. Excuse me. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I didn't even consult my doctor. I just stopped refilling my prescriptions. She didn't say anything. Of course, I have a new doctor now because I've moved from California to Tennessee. But, and we've had this discussion, and fortunately for me, praise God, she's okay with my choices. Anyway, that's beside the point. So what do I do now? Do I fast anymore? I do time-restricted eating, but not because I'm timing myself and I have a particular goal for how many hours I don't want to eat. The reason I say I do time-restricted eating is just because I'm not particularly hungry. It's very interesting. I have this experience where my stomach can be growly, where what most people would interpret as hunger, but I don't feel like eating. This has never I've never really experienced this before I started carnivore. I can have a rumbly stomach, which I used to interpret as being just ravenous and that, I needed to eat and I would be obsessed with food until I could eat something. Now my tummy's a little grumbly and I notice that it's there, but it doesn't bother me. And I can wait until it's convenient for me to eat, or I can wait until I really get hungry, which manifests itself as the desire just to eat something. How do I judge when I'm really hungry? I ask myself, what is the most boring food that I could think of? Boring food. And one of them is raw, plain ground beef. And one of them is boiled eggs. And if I feel like a bowl of just plain, not even salted ground beef seems delicious, or a plain boiled egg with no salt and pepper on it really appeals to me, then I know I'm hungry, regardless of whether my stomach is growling. I have learned that my stomach growling is not, for me, an accurate metric of whether I'm hungry. My stomach growling used to frighten me when I was into the low-fat, high-carb, plant-based regime, I call it, because, oh my gosh, if you fall off even a little bit, you can get castigated. But I didn't really belong to any communities at the time. I was just doing it all by myself, so I didn't have to worry so much about that. But the idea of having a growly stomach when you're doing that sort of a diet seems anathema. Oh my goodness, you should never get hungry. If you get hungry, you need to have a snack because it'll wreck your metabolism. It'll make your metabolism depressed. Well, I haven't found that to be the case. My metabolism when I'm not eating might slow down, or as I'm losing some more fat. I am undergoing another body sort of recomposition right now. I've lost about 6 or 8 pounds in the past week or so. So that's been interesting, and I haven't been trying in particular. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more at the end of the video. But I don't fast anymore. I don't even do deliberate time-restricted eating anymore because I find that I don't need to. I just need to feed my body what some people are calling a species-appropriate diet. And that, to me, doesn't necessarily mean that I never imbibe any plant foods. But what it does mean is, if I'm eating for nutrition and for bodily energy, I'm eating animal-based foods. And I add a little plant-based foods in for pleasure. Because like I've said in past videos, I don't have a problem with my food being pleasurable for me. The important thing is the food that gives me pleasure is the food that nourishes my body. All right. Now I know that if I went and I got a donut, that donut would be very pleasurable in the short term, just like any other sort of junk food. In fact, for my birthday, I had a cheat day and I ate toast and jam for my birthday. I bought ciabatta rolls and I ate 2 ciabatta rolls toasted with butter and orange marmalade. But you know what? After that, I stopped. And I had to buy a whole 6-pack of ciabatta rolls because I couldn't buy them one at a time. You used to be able to buy ciabatta rolls one at a time at Walmart, and you can't anymore, but oh well. So I just gave them away. Didn't find any shortage of takers. But I don't fast, not deliberately, and I do time-restricted eating just because I'm comfortable with that. So what's the takeaway here? If you want to fast because you think it's going to be helpful to you, you go ahead and do it. And don't let anybody tell you you're going to wreck your metabolism, because I'm telling you, if you're doing it in the short term as an experiment, you are not going to wreck your metabolism. Your metabolism is very, very likely just going to rebound back to where it was after you stop fasting and go back to your regular way of eating. Now, if fasting makes you feel good, that's an important signal that you're doing something right, okay? If it makes you feel bad, that's a signal that you may be not doing something right. So if it makes you feel bad, do something else. If it makes you feel great, don't let anybody scare you off of it. All right? That's it. I don't want to make these videos too long. I could talk for an hour, but y'all aren't interested in that sort of rambling. So I will talk to you again later. Do your own experiments. Do what makes you feel good. And don't worry about and be scared of what other people are telling you. Do your own research. I will post some links in the description about some more information about time-restricted eating and fasting in case you're interested. And until next time, peace, love, and meat. I love you all. Bye-bye.